Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland again. Welcome back everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a cowboy classic in Fallout New Vegas. We're going to be talking about the Cowboy Repeater. The first lever action gun that you're going to get access to in Fallout New Vegas, probably. You could potentially just run north of Good Springs and maybe find the trail carbine early, but assuming you're going the normal way, you're probably going to find the Cowboy Repeater first. You can also pick up a Cowboy Repeater early on in the town of Prim. There's a nearly broken one in the sheriff's office, or maybe there's two in the sheriff's office. I always forget about that. Vendors tend to sell them. Prospectors can have Cowboy Repeaters. Raiders can have Cowboy Repeaters. They're not super uncommon, and it does kind of suck early on when Raiders do have these because they are fairly accurate and they do hit fairly hard, but they're not necessarily like an unfair weapon in the early game. They're just kind of stronger than the average weapons. This one requires 25 guns and 4 strength in order to wield. 25 guns is fine. On a guns build, you're probably going to have that by the time you find the Cowboy Repeater. 4 strength is also not super high, so it's pretty accessible for most builds. This one does 32 damage per shot, which is fine. This one does 54 damage per second, which is pretty decent. It does 32 crit damage, which is also fine. Has a slightly above crit chance at 1.25 times, so you're a little bit more likely to hit crits with the Cowboy Repeater than you otherwise would with other weapons generally. This one costs 27 action points to use in VATS, which is not super high. That's actually pretty good for the early game and kind of good throughout the game. Has very low spread at 0.06, so it is extremely accurate at very long ranges. However, the sights are a little bit weird, and we'll talk about that when we get to the cons of the weapon. The one you're seeing in the background, though, is actually a modified one, so it doesn't always look like this, but I just really like the look of this Cowboy Repeater more so than the one that's in the vanilla game, so I switched it over thanks to the mods. Doesn't actually change the stats or anything, just changes the way that it looks. This one holds 7 shots in it by default, which is pretty good, and it reloads fairly quick. You have to reload each shot one at a time, but you can cancel the reload whenever you would like with this weapon, which is pretty good. You can also do the weapon swap trick with this one too, since it does reload one at a time, where you just empty out the gun, switch off to another gun, and then switch back to the Cowboy Repeater, and then it will be fully reloaded again, so that's kind of nice if you want to do it that way. This one weighs 5 weight, which is not super high for a rifle, and this one has 120 item health, which is also not super high for a rifle. The item health makes it so you can break the Cowboy Repeater fairly fast, especially with its decent rate of fire. This one is kind of unsurprisingly affected by the Cowboy perk as well, which gets you more damage, and it makes it a pretty solid option in the early game where you can actually have a pretty good amount of damage and damage per second thanks to that from the Cowboy Repeater. This one does fire the 357 round, which is one of the more common rounds in the early game. Vendors tend to sell a lot of it. And it does have a couple different ammunition types that you can load into it, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's go over the pros and cons first, and then we'll talk about ammo. So for the basic pros of the Cowboy Repeater, it does have really good ammo. Ammo is super easy to find for the 357. You can also find 38 rounds and put them into it. And the ammo overall is fairly strong, which is really good. It also has pretty good damage per second, even though its damage per shot is just kind of okay. It does have at least fast follow-up shots, so damage per second is good. And it does have good range. It's very accurate so long as you're okay with that peep sight. For the cons of it, the aperture sight is not most people's favorite, and that's why mine is modded, because I don't like the aperture sight. These like barleycorn sights are a little bit better, or I don't actually know what these are entirely called. But these type of sights are okay enough compared to the original sights, and it has low item health, so breaking it can be kind of annoying early on. It's not hard to find Cowboy Repeaters, nor is it hard to find people that would repair this, and it's not going to be super expensive, at least compared to certain other weapons, but it still can be a little bit annoying to be breaking this weapon. For the overall ammos that you got access to, you have the basic 357, which is your normal ammunition. There's nothing really crazy about that. It does the standard damage, has standard everything on it. And then there is the 38 special round. This one will deal 75% less damage to targets, but it also deals 75% less damage to your gun. So your gun can shoot even more of this. You can also buy this in bulk, which is pretty cool. The main reason why this works, which I don't know if it actually would work in a lever action rifle like this, I feel like it might, but a 357 and a 38 bullet can fit inside of something like a 357 revolver. That's why this works for anybody wondering. There's also hollow point rounds for the 357, so 75% more damage on hollow point rounds, but they give the enemy that you're fighting 3 times the amount of damage threshold that they otherwise would have. So if you're fighting an enemy with armor, hollow point rounds are not a good option. If you're fighting an enemy without armor or very light armor, then hollow points are a really good option. So if you have those, that's pretty cool. And then there is one unique round that you can get with this with the hand loader perk that is called the Jacketed Flat Points. The Jacketed Flat Points are honestly one of the best unique rounds that you can load into this, because they give you 25% more damage They also ignore 3 armor on any enemy, which is really good, and they make your weapon 20% more accurate, which doesn't really matter for the Cowboy Repeater that much because it's not going to get that much more accurate. But all of those other bonuses are really good. Armor breaking and damage, and this comes with no downside whatsoever, other than you're just not going to be able to make as many bullets of this as you would regular 357 rounds. But that's a very, very tiny con that I'm totally willing to overlook for just having stronger bullets overall. And it makes it so hand loader, if you're going with the 357 weapons, is a super tempting option. It's generally a pretty tempting option with the guns builds just in general, unless you're only going to go with like 44 because you can get that a different way. With all of this for the Cowboy Repeater, on my tier list, I would probably put the Cowboy Repeater into C tier. It's pretty good early on, although you can break it fairly quick. It does make for a pretty good early game weapon and mid game weapon. Can kind of fall off later. It also works really well if you're going to take it to Old World Blues because there's a lot of 357 around there, so it's just a pretty decent option. Now there is still a modded version and a unique version of the Cowboy Repeater we got to talk about, so let's go over the modded version of this next, where you can put 3 mods on the Cowboy Repeater. You can put a maple stock on it, which this lowers the weight of the Cowboy Repeater and honestly kind of makes it look nicer. So this one will take your weight from 5 to 3.5. That's pretty good. Makes it so you can carry around even more stuff, so that's always nice to have. It's a nice quality of life mod, but it's nothing way crazy. Then you can have a long tube on this. This will increase your magazine size from 7 rounds to 11 rounds, which is really good for a weapon like this because you can shoot it fairly fast, so holding 11 rounds is really good. It does take longer to reload then, but again, you can do the weapon swap trick and just switch it off there. That one's one that you always want to look out for. And there is also a custom action for the Cowboy Repeater, which gives it 20% more rate of fire, which is also really good. It already has pretty good rate of fire. Having it have even higher rate of fire is even better. It makes it so hip firing this is also pretty fun, although it does look pretty silly if you're doing it in third person with your person just kind of bobbing around as you just lever the gun really quick. But all of these combined do actually make the Cowboy Repeater quite a bit better. The main problem for any of these mods is that it's going to be very difficult to find them. At least it always is for me, because not very many vendors sell the Cowboy Repeater parts. I think the Trading Post down south can sell them. I think the 188 sells them. Crimson Caravan can sell them. Gunrunners can sell them, but rarely do. A lot of the time when I'm doing a playthrough, it is really difficult to find a fully modded out Cowboy Repeater for whatever reason. I'm usually missing one part. I can find either like the tube in the stock or the tube in the action, but I can't find the stock. And sometimes you'll find like 6 actions and then none of the other parts to it. It's very inconsistent overall. I'm not sure why that is, but it seems like Cowboy Repeater parts are one of like the most rare things for me to find in this game, and there's just no reason for it. But if you do have all the mods on the Cowboy Repeater, I would actually move this up a tier in our tier list. I would put this one up into B tier. It's all around pretty solid. And again, if you want to take this to Old World Blues, it's actually really good. A lot of 357 just laying around, so you're never going to run out of bullets with it. You can fix it fairly easy, even more so if you have jury rigging. Then this one is really, really easy to fix up, so the item health doesn't matter that much. And it just does good damage and good damage per second. Nothing way flashy about this weapon, and it will get outcompeted by other weapons, even other lever action guns. But it's still just really nice overall. There is also the unique version, which you can steal or you can kill somebody in order to get. This is called the Long Carbine, or however you'd really like to pronounce it. This one, interestingly enough, comes from both a book and a movie's gun's name too, which is Last of the Mohicans, which is pretty cool. If you haven't seen that or if you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. It's a pretty decent movie and it's a pretty decent book overall. Book can go on for a little bit long. It's kind of one of my complaints, but the movie is pretty nice and it's also kind of long, but it's pretty good. Anyway, to actually get this weapon in Fallout New Vegas, you have to steal this off of Corporal Sterling at Camp McCarran, or wherever the heck he is if he gets sent around the Mojave. He can either be there or he can be at Camp Forlorn Hope, and you can steal this off of him or you can kill him and take it off of him. If you want to steal it, you can do a reverse pickpocket of stealing his ammo, going away, waiting like a day or so or an hour or so, and he should put the weapon away and then you can steal it off of him and then have the gun itself. If you aren't going to be with the NCR, then you could always kill him and just take it off of him. And this one is already sort of modded out by itself since it has the extended tube that the regular one does, although it does have a different reload animation where it reloads all the rounds. It reuses the same animation that was in Fallout 3 for reloading the lever actions there, so it does make it faster if you need to just reload the entire tube, but a little bit slower if you just need to reload 1 or 2 rounds into this. And it also always has a scope on it, which is pretty interesting. So this one requires 25 guns and 5 strength, 1 more strength to wield than the regular Cowboy Repeater, which is a little bit strange. This one does 35 damage per shot, slightly better than the Cowboy Repeater. has 75 damage per second, which is quite a bit better. This one, I think, already has like the custom action put onto it, which is good. The carbine also does 35 damage on crit, which is pretty nice. Has a 1.5 times modifier, so slightly better than the Cowboy Repeater there. Costs 24 action points, so it's actually pretty good in a VATS build to be using this weapon. Has even better spread at 0.05, which you're probably never going to notice. Both these weapons are extremely accurate. Holds 11 rounds in it, weighs 5 weight, and it has 150 item health, so a little bit better item health overall. Overall, this one is kind of just more personal preference, whether you like the scoped version or the regular version of the Cowboy Repeater. Both are pretty good. I usually end up just using the regular Cowboy Repeater more so than I use the carbine. The carbine can be kind of a pain to get, especially if you don't want to kill Sterling to get it, because stealing from him is not very consistent. Reverse pickpocketing is never really consistent in these games to where you just have to constantly like save, reload, till you eventually get the gun off of them. It's the same thing with like the Big Boomer and a couple other weapons. If you don't want to kill the NPC, then stealing it off them is going to take you a little while, and you're going to have to sit there and save scum to get it, which is fine. It's what I like to do because I like to collect all these weapons, even if I don't use a lot of them. So I wouldn't put this one any higher than the modded out Cowboy Repeater. I'd also put it up into B tier. It can be pretty cool, and if you really like the Cowboy Repeater and you just really want a scoped version of it, this is going to be your best option, short of mods where you can mod whatever the heck you want into the game. So should you use the Cowboy Repeater? I would say sure, especially if you're going with the Cowboy build. People really love going with Cowboy builds in New Vegas. They are popular for a reason. They are really strong in New Vegas, and they are really cool looking. So the Cowboy Repeater is going to be like your first lever action gun, and it's going to be a pretty consistent lever action gun that never really feels overpowered, but never really feels underpowered either. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Tell me your thoughts on the Cowboy Repeater and its unique variants down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.